Hi, I'm Steve Wood. I'm a recovered alcoholic. It's really an honor to be in here today. It's exciting. I've got to know a lot of you over the last couple months doing the Monday morning book study. My sobriety is August 23rd, 2000. And so I was supposed to share this meeting about a month ago and I got COVID. So that kind of threw a wrench in it. And now I'm back. I'm glad to be here. And I just, I'm just going to talk about 1, 2, and 3. And I don't really know the format of the meeting, except I know I can speak for a while. But I want to talk a little bit about myself, just so you know where I come from. So about my drinking, or I should say my thinking. So when I was a teenager, I really just wanted to be me. I wish being me was enough and being happy. I just couldn't find myself, and then I discovered alcohol. And that was not my first drink. My first drink when I was 12, and I drank a bunch of my dad's liquor cabinet, vodka and vermouth and wine and everything, and got sick. But that's not the day I discovered alcohol. The day I discovered alcohol, I was 16 years old. I walked into a party much out of my comfort zone, a lot of people there, and someone handed me a 180 proof bottle of White Lightning. And I didn't gag. I actually drank it, and the universe changed. I could look the world in the eye. My fears fell from me. I had peace of mind, and new freedom, new happiness. Self-pity disappeared. All the same thing as the promises. Alcohol did for me what I couldn't do for myself. And when I finally found myself, and then my parents put me in rehab at 21, and it was like I felt, what's going on here? I'm having a good time with this. I finally found myself. 23, rehab again, and I never got much time at those places. I mean, I got out and I drank again. I remember I was really in denial at a problem. I did not want to admit I had any problem at all. And when basically, I remember thinking when I first started recognizing there was a problem with control was when I had blackouts. And I would think, well, the 11th drink, I have a blackout. So I'll have 5, and I couldn't control it. And my mid 20s, 25, I did 2 back-to-back trips to rehab. And all those trips to rehab had one thing in common. I never got more than 3 months of sobriety. I never got past the 3rd step. And I sat at meetings miserable, restless, irritable, discontent, just not happy. And it was like I was drinking when I wasn't drinking. Alcohol was still controlling me. And my drinking got to the point that I needed to drink just to get out of bed in the morning. If I did have a job, I needed to take something to move around during the day, like the Louded or something like that, or some type of other stuff at night to keep me up all night so I could drink. And another trip to rehab back to back. And the thing that was interesting is in 96, I went into a meeting, and I did not like AA anymore, or whatever fellowships there were. I was really, to my mind, it didn't work. It was just part of my excuses. And what happened was very interesting. I went into this room, and it was filled with people. And it looked like a classroom. People were at desks and stuff like that. And it looked like that they were, looked like a classroom. And I went up to my friend. I said, "What is this meeting?" And he goes, "Shut up and go sit down." And I sat down, and these 2 guys broke down Docker's opinion, and it blew my mind. I never heard talk like that before. And I got a sponsor and did 1, 2, and 3, but I could accept I had an allergy, but I couldn't accept that I had a spiritual problem, or a spiritual, much less a spiritual solution. So I went back out. And the last 4 years of my addiction were just like falling downhill. Friends cut me off. Family didn't talk to me anymore. You could find me anywhere. You could find me sleeping under a tree. You could find me sleeping in my car, someone's car, whatever it was. I was lucky to have a penny to my name. And by 98, I welcomed death. And I knew I was bodily and mentally different. The guy told me I was. And the best way I could describe it, and I'll get into the 1, 2, and 3, is if you go to page 31, and where it says we do not like to pronounce. And this is what got me to Alcoholics Anonymous finally. We do not like to pronounce any individual alcoholic, but you can quickly diagnose yourself. Step over in there's barroom and try some controlled drinking or some controlled drug usage, whatever. Try to drink and stop abruptly. Try it more than once. It will not take you long enough to decide if you are honest with yourself. There's a condition about it. It may be worth a bad case of jitters to get full knowledge of your condition. And that's what it took. It was like a 4-year-long thing to figure that out. And when I walked out of rehab the 7th time, I was very tired. You know, I was willing to go to any lengths, and I knew I didn't have lots of time because I never got more than 3 months or past this 3rd step. I need to get on the steps right away and into it. I tracked down those book thumping guys, hung onto their feet, and went at it. And I had a spiritual awakening, spiritual experience during step 6, and propelled me to making amends. And today I live in 10, 11, 12. So my life today is built around helping others. I love doing book studies. I love doing this stuff. I never thought I'd be on Zoom, years ago. I didn't even know what Zoom was until, pandemic. But and that said, I have a study called Big Book Compendium every Monday. And I just love teaching. So let's talk about 1, 2, and 3. I believe people look way too much into 1, 2, and 3, and because there's not a whole lot to do there. You have 3 thoughts. You have, admitting, belief, and a decision. But the simplest way to look at it is, I'm powerless. I need power. I must make a decision to seek power or not. And we can do one or the other. But while there's not a whole lot to do there, if they're not explained correctly, especially by a sponsor, the formula is messed up, the recipe gets destroyed. So I'm going to try to simplify these steps. My focus is going to be on step 1 is powerlessness, is why we are powerless. Step 2, we're going to look at why, where, and how do we find the power? And 3, how do we turn our lives over to the care of God? So I'm going to cover everything I'm not going to be able to cover everything in those steps, obviously. I'm going to have to leave some stuff out, usually cover with sponsees and stuff and book studies, but I'm going to do my best to cover the main elements and fuse it together. So there's an old saying that I love called the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And that's step 1. There's also another saying I love is the end justifies the means. A dark life sometimes is necessary to achieve a new life. And in recovery, there's lots of confusion on 1. Many think step 1 is raising your hand in a meeting, saying I'm alcoholic. Some say it's just being sober. Step 1 is about admitting you are powerless. Step 1, admitted we're powerless over alcohol, dash that our lives have become unmanageable. So admit means to declare something as true. And it also has another interesting definition. It also means to grant entry. Like you see an old movie ticket or a concert ticket, it says admit 1. So in essence, admitting you are powerless is our ticket to a new life. Again, like the end justifies the means. And this powerlessness means completely without power. Lights are off, 0, no human power. We do not have the ability to solve our problem anymore using human resources, or maybe never did. Hope is a condition of mind and body. But here's the interesting thing. Step 1 does not require you to admit we're alcoholic. A lot of confusion there. But rather we're powerless over alcohol. Being powerless over alcohol means we have lost the freedom of choice when drinking, before we drink, after. There's also on step 1 what's called the M dash. And there's a lot of confusion there. Some people just think it means another and or therefore. But an M dash is a punctuation mark, which is used. It's used to create a strong ending to something. It's where it divides a sentence together, creates a strong ending point, exclamation point, almost like powerless over alcohol. Your life's unmanageable. It's like it's telling you that. So unmanageability is the inability to manage. Is the inability to manage and control and accomplish things. Inability to. So many think unmanageability, especially in the fellowship, they tell you it's about when you're drunk. No, I mean, who isn't unmanageable when they're drunk? Unmanageability comes from, I mean, so many different directions, consequences. You got your DUIs, you got lost friends, family breakups, car accidents. I mean, you can increase the list, and losing your job, DUIs, rehab. How about the insanity of the first drink? All those things are, go to unmanageability. But then there's the unmanageability Bill Wilson talks about when you're bone dry, right? And that's being restless, irritable, and discontent. That restless, irritable, discontent is the complete mindset of having high anxiety, deep fear, coupled with being easily pissed off, coupled with being never not satisfied. I don't think anyone here ever had that problem, right? That's in between a spree, when you run out, whatever. And also it's being dry in recovery, no steps. The book calls this type of unmanageability, that type, many things: spiritual malady, insanity, spiritual sickness. I like to call it untreated alcoholism. And if I continue to experience that type of unmanageability, all the unmanageabilities, my mind will eventually seek out the ease and comfort it comes at once by taking a few drinks. Unmanageability is only overcome by doing 4 through 9 and then living in step 10, 11, 12. And you hear people say crazy things like step 1 is the only non-spiritual step. It might be the most spiritual because being powerless pushes you to seek power. Step 1 is the most important step because if I'm not willing to admit I'm powerless, nothing else can happen. It's also the only step I need to do 100%. When people in the fellowship hear 100%, they think abstinence. So I don't say it much anymore because it gets confusing. It's 100% convinced you're alcoholic. No lurking notion that one day you can pick up a drink. This is why the big book devotes so many pages to step 1, like 35 pages, I believe. That's including doctor's pen. And which is why step 1 is the foundation. And any foundation, a house not built on a strong foundation falls. And the foundation is a base. Think about it, it's the base of a building. It anchors everything together, holds everything together. This is the willingness foundation, step 1, or the readiness foundation. Are you ready to admit you are powerless? You're either powerless or you're not. I mean, that's the way you look at it. And so, why are we powerless? Let's go to Docker's opinion. And this is the 4th edition I have. So it's XXV III XXV III, where it says we believe. So this is going to tell us why we're powerless. And it's a very deep here. So it says we believe. And so suggested a few years ago, the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics, and that means it's progressive, is the manifestation, the sign of an allergy. Now, when I heard that the first time and they said allergy, I'm like, I don't break out in hives when I drink. I don't get, spots. I don't, get a runny nose or anything like that. And my sponsor says, you don't know anything, pick up a dictionary. And I did. And it said abnormal reaction to a substance. And he looked at me and says, do you have an abnormal reaction to alcohol? And I go, yeah, and everything else I do. So abnormal means away from normal. Do you have an abnormal reaction? And then it says that the phenomenon of craving, and craving is uncontrolled desire for more, and phenomenon means something that's unexplainable. So this phenomenon of craving is our physical reaction to alcohol or drugs when we put into our system after the first drink. And that causes we crave more, and more. And we go on a run or spree, whatever you want to call it. So we have a physical reaction to alcohol coupled with the overwhelming desire to drink that makes us a real alcoholic. We can't stop when we start. And once we're stopped, we can't stop from starting. Another way I look at it is I have a mind that condemns me to drink against my will, and I have a body that condemns me to death. So the desire to drink against our will is called mental obsession. And that's the reoccurring, persistent, very persistent idea of drinking that doesn't respond to reason. And it has no choice. Our obsession makes us put alcohol in our bodies or drugs, whatever your thing is, and setting the allergy in motion, even though it might kill us. That obsession says, despite your deep conviction to never want to drink again, you will do anyways. Humiliation is suffering, ain't gonna stop it. There's no defense against it. All desires crushed. Yeah, but alcohol isn't cunning, baffling, and powerful or anything else. It's the obsession, because I'm going to do it despite knowing the consequences involved. All reason to not do it out the, the girlfriend threatening you, all reasons out the window. The wife threatening you, husband threatening you, the kids telling you to stop. But here's the important thing is, this is the ammo we need to bring to Alcoholics Anonymous or wherever we go. The mental hopelessness of alcoholism, powerless over alcohol because of the allergy obsession. We're not powerless over people, places, and things like they want to tell us. Those things are I mean, I don't know. I don't want to get into all that. But those things, never made me do things against my will. This had me at mercy. And all those slogans and stuff to kind of pee in the soup, so to speak, of this vital message is very important. So the question was said, why are we powerless? Physical allergy, mental obsession. Let's go back to the book. A little more to read on step one. The phenomenon of craving is limited in its class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all, and once having formed the habit, found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, the problems pile up on them and they become astonishingly difficult to solve. Now, notice the unmanageability at the end there. Our problems pile up on this, and we become astonishingly difficult to solve. People, ourselves, everything. These problems pile up on us. DUIs, all that stuff I mentioned a minute ago, all that stuff I mentioned. The insanity of the first drink, the insanity we can't stop, restless, irritable discontent, living with, holding on to resentment and fears for our whole life. We're astonishingly difficult to solve. Our life is like a puzzle that's been thrown up in the air and scattered across the room. And we need something to help us put it back together. And we need something to replace the old pieces that we don't want no more. And it's called the steps. And what's interesting is doctor's opinion says later, unless this person can experience, that's the allergic type, can experience entire psychic change, there's very little hope as recovery. What's interesting is this psychic change that they're talking about is a very interesting word. It's because it's not a word we hear every day. They're telling us we need a change in our thinking. Now, I can go to church and have a psychic change or the shrink or whatever, or a new job. They're telling us entire, it means complete psychic change. That means a radical change to my thinking and belief system, a belief system that's run on guilt and high and low self-esteem and stuff like that. But here's the thing, when radical changes happen to our thinking, our thinking changes. When our thinking changes, our beliefs change. When our beliefs change, our desires change. And when our desires change, our desire to drink disappears. Radical changes in our thinking and beliefs shifts our desires. Obsession gone. The only avenue I knew that can do that is the 12 steps. Go to page 30. So page 30, where it says we learned. This is where I take Svanseeds to complete step one. We learned we had to fully complete. There's that word, it said entire a minute ago, now it says fully. Those are big words. Complete. We learned we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we're alcoholics, powers over alcohol, right? Allergy obsession. This is the first step of recovery. The delusion, the insanity we're like other people has to be smashed, shattered. So a modern dictionary will tell you, and it means to seek the truth or tell the truth, whatever. I'm sorry. A 1930s dictionary will tell you, which I use for the big book, will tell you to concede means surrender. Surrender means to give up the control, to stop fighting, to admit defeat, to give all rights over to the conqueror. They're asking us to completely surrender our innermost selves. The innermost part of the ocean is the deepest part, the abyss, the most beautiful part. So the innermost part of us must be deep within, inside of us. And here's the catch. In order to surrender to our innermost selves, I need to know what alcoholic is. Thanks to this information in this book, that can happen. Allergy obsession. You cannot surrender without that information. Otherwise, I'm sitting at meetings the rest of my life and thinking, raising my hand is step one, and hoping I get better. So surrender is not a sign of weakness, it's the ultimate sign of strength. And it's a foundation for this life. So when I take a sponsee to step one, here's what I ask them. I ask them questions kind of like these. Do you relate from allergy obsession from actual experience? Do you believe you are powerless over alcohol and drugs? Do you have a hopeless condition of mind and body? Or a hopeless condition? Do you believe it's a hopeless condition? Do you believe that human power failed you? And of course, I ask them, do you believe your life's unmanageable? After I ask them a set of those questions, whatever kind of matches the person, I let them sit on those for a minute. And I come back at them in silence. And I like to look at them right in the eyes and say, do you fully surrender to your innermost self? I have to take it very seriously. Once they say yes, I say you completed step one. So you see why step one is the most important step. Do you see why we have to do it 100%? It's very important. And it propels us right into step two. Came to believe a power greater than self resource sanity. It's a very nice way for Bill telling us that we're insane, right? But believe means to trust something with, that something is true or real. But we need to go from belief to faith, and faith is a certainty if something is true or real, without question. And that's like the Gnostic, not the agnostic. Agnostic is someone that's unsure of God and wants proof. The Gnostic is someone where you go beyond believing and get a spiritual understanding of knowing God as a result of some type of conversion experience, psychic change. Step two is not going to get me there, nor is it supposed to. If it could, it would be a two-step program. It would be done. It'd be real easy. I don't have to believe in anything in step two, just willing to believe. So power greater than myself means I have a power greater than I possess. And restore means to bring me back to my original condition. Maybe when you were a child, when you had peace, and sanity means soundness of mind, complete, whole. Insanity must mean unsoundness of mind, incomplete. So I need to get restored to sanity. Go to page 84. I'm going to show you guys a secret a lot of people don't show a lot in AA. Well, I'm sure some of you know this. But so hypothetically, if we're going through like a book study and we're on page 44 is when step two starts. And we're on this thing, we're on page 84. That's 40 pages later with lots of work and directions. Look what it says towards the bottom of the page. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. For by this time, sanity has returned. There's a lot of work to be done in between then. So I like to point that out to people. It doesn't happen in step two. Step two is basically a sign that says, come my way. Here's some hope. It's a mirror of step one. Powerless, power, unmanageability, sanity. Let's go to page 45. It says lack of power. That's our dilemma. That's our problem. Lack of power. We had to find a power by which we could live. So lack means zero, by the way. It doesn't mean a little bit. We had to find which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. But where and how do we find that power? For step two, this is the most essential information that can be explained. Where and how do we find this power? Location and method. So how we find the power, let's go to page 25. So we're going to go in this chapter that's called There is a Solution. Now, there's some confusion here. And I'm not saying I'm right on everything, far from it. But the way I was taught by my peers is a solution is a method we use to bring us to the answer, right? It's like a mathematical problem. 5 times 5 is 25. When you put that up on a board in like a big book study and you say, what's the solution? They say 25, that's the answer. Then it must be 5 times 5 is a solution. No, it's multiplication. It's the method I use to bring me to the answer. Our problem is allergy obsession, right? The method we use to get past that, the solution is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? So the answer we get is whatever we discover. Peace, freedom, love, whatever it is. But let's see, it's going to break it down even more. It says almost none of us, that means a lot of them, didn't like the self-searching. Yeah, so that's this, the self-analysis, soul surgery, inventory. And so that's the deep examination of my thoughts, ideas, and actions to uncover what drives me to those thoughts and actions. That's leading to a new awareness. Sounds like step 4. To leveling of pride. I always thought leveling meant like a leveler where it evens something out. No, when you're talking about like when you level a building, like you demolish it. The demolishing of pride, the demolishing of what other people think, the fear of what other people think of me. That happens in 4 through 9, especially 9. Then it says the confession of our shortcomings. That's the admission of wrong thinking and actions that a lot of us want to keep hidden. Sounds like 5, which the process requirement for successful consummation means to reach a goal intended. What is our goal? 4 and 5. To discard our defects, and 6 and 7, to get rid of them. That's our goal. That's the mountain top. And once we're there, we want to go out and repair relations. 8, 9. So how do I find this power? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So let's talk about the location. Where we find the power. Let's go to page 55. So, I grew up in a very old school Catholic family growing up. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, it was like very culture. I went to Catholic school, church on Sunday, altar boy, all that stuff. And my mom said, if you don't pray, you go to hell. And if you're bad, God punishes you. As I grew more towards God, I started to believe that God was, not just punishing. He was angry, unloving, judgmental, critical, never there, didn't listen. And he's an old man up in these clouds with a long white beard. And he's watching me wherever I go. And that was kind of scary because enough people were watching me already. But this leads me to questioning God. I got doubt. And at 31 years old, when I sat down with my sponsor, that was my conception of God. I had a lot of doubt, and I very much agnostic at that time. See what the book says. Actually, we're fooling ourselves. For deep down, every man, woman, child is a fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured by calamity, which is chaos, by pomp, which is pride, by worship of other things. We know what that stuff was. But in some form or another, it was there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves, miraculous demonstrations of that power in human life are facts as old as man himself. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup just as much as feelings we have for a friend. It's very important to think about what you look for in a friend. Unconditional love, loyalty, respect, calm, has my back, forgiving, unjudging, someone who listens. So here's the condition to finding God. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he was there. And look at this. He was much as fact as we were. We found the great reality deep down within us. After looking everywhere else, right? Outside of us. It is only there where him may be found. It is so with us. So what's the great reality? God. And so where is God? Deep down within us, or whatever you want to call it. You don't have to call it God. But it's within us. Call it love, call it intuition. And here's the promise of this consciousness. We can only clear the ground a bit. If our testimony have sweep away prejudice, enables you to think honestly, encourage you to search diligently within yourself. That's 4 through 9. Then if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. Broad highway is 10, 11, 12. With this attitude, then the attitude is the willingness to always look honestly within yourself. Be honest with yourself. That's what the big book tells us. With this attitude, you cannot fail. The conscious of your belief is sure to come to you. Something interesting happened to me I want to share is when I did step 5, I discovered I was punishing. I was angry. I was unloving. I was critical. I was mean. I was never there. All the stuff I thought was God. The God I resented was me. And the idea that, I gave God the characteristics of me, it just foreshadowed myself. It was only in my insane mind. And remember when I talk about looking for a friend, my sponsor asked me to write that down. And he says, you'll meet this friend one day. And when I did step 10 every day, I started to love others no matter what they did. I looked for good in others. I had courage, forgiveness, happiness, I'm, open-mindedness, all that stuff. This is real. And I could talk to this thing. And it loved me no matter whatever it did. You see, everything in life I thought was something turned out to be nothing, but the very nothing I was left with was everything. I'm gonna grab something real quick if I can find it. Well, I'm just gonna lie and say this is an acorn. You know what an acorn looks like from like an oak tree. I don't have my acorn. I just dropped it somewhere. So an acorn is of course part of the oak tree, right? And what happens with an acorn, it's real little, it's tiny. And it's the ultimate symbol of growth and spirituality. It's also the symbol of transformation and change because it turns into something totally different than what it was. It's hard to believe that a little acorn this big can turn into something totally different than it was. It's hard to believe it can turn into the gigantic oak tree and look anything like its creator. And once the acorn hits the ground, something miraculous happens, right? It begins to turn to just get enough sunlight. It moves just enough to get enough water. Germination happens and it grabs the right soil with its roots. That tells me within the acorn is all the information it needs to survive. It turns into what it's encoded to be, what's programmed to be, the image and likeness of its creator. Are we any different than the acorn? We too, within us, have all the information we need to survive. And we too can turn into what we're encoded to be, right? So when I see an acorn, I don't see an acorn, I see an oak tree. An oak tree is within, the tree is within the acorn. Just like when I see you, I see God. What the oak tree is the acorn, God is to you. And we too can turn the image and likeness of God. And where is God? Deep down within us. So for step 2, I also have questions I ask guys. Has human power, again, I ask them, failed you overcome alcoholism? Are you open-minded about finding a power greater than yourself? Are you willing to take action to find that power? And then I take the question that's on 47, and I personalize it. Do you believe, or are you willing to believe in a power greater than yourself? As soon as a person can say they believe or are willing to believe, we have faculty show them on their way. And I tell them they completed step 2. And it only have to be willing to believe. So then I usually with a sponsee stop there and let it sink in. Sometimes I go right into 3, but I'm gonna do that today. As it says, half measures. So if I'm on page 59, and this is how I tie it together. So we're on page 59. Remember, this takes us into a chapter called How It Works, how the solution works, how 429 works, right? Page 59, we hear this read at meetings a lot. Half measures avails nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. So what's the turning point? I never knew what the turning point was until this was pointed out to me. Go to page 53, a little back, but 53 says something very interesting. It says, when we were alcoholic, when we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis. So it wasn't our upbringing. It wasn't what people did to me. It wasn't anyone else's fault or God's fault. We could not postpone or evade. We had to fiercely face the proposition that either God is everything or he's nothing. God either is or isn't. What is our choice to be? Am I willing to make a decision that God is everything or nothing? Step 3 is made a decision to turn my one life over to the care of God, as we understood him, which I love. God is very misunderstood because people believe step 3 is where you turn your life over to God. If we could do that, it would be a 3-step program, just like step 2, I said, maybe 63 pages. And the book would be a lot cheaper and a lot of other stuff. So it says decision. A decision is a key part of the thought process. And what do we do there? We analyze a situation of uncertainty, right? And gather facts so we know what course of action to take, right? It's a pre-thought plan prior to action. That's all. It's only a decision. It's a thought. You've heard, I don't know if you've heard the saying, but there's an old saying, it's 3 frogs sit on a log and 1 frog makes a decision to jump off the log. You ask people that question, they say, how many are left? They say 2. No, it's 3. Only 1 made a decision to jump off. Same thing here. Nothing changes, nothing changes. So the most important component of a decision, secret ingredient, is action. Until we act on the decision, all we have is a decision. And it says to turn. And people in the meetings love to say, oh, I'm going through a divorce. They want to turn a single situation over to God. I'm just going to turn it over. They're not telling us to do that here. The steps aren't that easy. It says turning our will and our lives over to God, transfer of control, turning our will and our lives. Our will is our thinking and our lives is our actions. Think about this. In step 4, we inventory our thinking, resentments and fear, and we inventory our actions, harms and sex conduct. We inventory those things. We're making a decision to turn our thinking and actions over to the care of God. The question is, that I always wonder is, what does the care of God mean? Because, I look at it as like a caretaker. When my grandma got ill, she needed someone, she was kind of getting absent and incompetent. She needed someone to do for her what she couldn't do for herself anymore. We need someone that's competent, trustworthy, available, all loving. Like I said, could do for her what you couldn't do for herself. You put God in there, it becomes endless. God as you understand it, your own personal comprehension of God, rather than what another person says God is, no matter how limited your God is, or whatever you want to call it. Page 60. Page 60. It's going to say some deep stuff here. The first requirement, so it's after the ABCs. The first requirement is to be convinced, to be certain that any life run self-will will probably be a success. This is where the book completely shifts from drinking to spiritual, right? From this point on, it's all about personality change sufficient to bring about recovery. What is self-will? Self-will is my unconscious devotion to my social, security, and sexual needs. It's our misdirected instincts. Referred to the big book as self. So when these instincts are misdirected, they make our lives unmanageable, not alcohol. They drive every resentment, every fear, every harm, our sex conduct. These are the things like pride, personal relations, self-esteem we see on the 4-step, pocketbook, sex relations. The 3rd column, the affects mind, right? It's what makes a 4-step not a confession. Go deeper than that. So my question is with that in mind, what is success? It means to achieve a goal. So what's the opposite of success? Failure. Let's go to page 52. And we're going to look at the 3rd, the bedevilments that people call them on page 52, which is the 3rd paragraph, 2nd sentence. This is the results of my life on instincts. Any life run on self-will is failure. And you're going to see instincts within these. I'm not going to be as thorough as I am in the book study course because we're out of time, but it says we were having trouble with personal relationships, failure. We couldn't control our emotional natures, failure. We were prey to misery and depression, failure. We couldn't make a living, failure. We had a feeling of uselessness, failure. We're full of fear, failure. We're unhappy, failure. We couldn't seem to help other people, failure. All these failures is a result of the illusion we can live on self-will and run the show ourselves. Any life run on self-will will probably be a success. Now, all those failures turn into results in a loving way later on in the 9th step promises. quite opposite of those. You can look them up online. They're opposite ones. Very beautiful. So now we're going to go to page 62, and we're going to wrap up on these 2 pages. So we're going to go deeper, a little deeper now, even in, right around the same area of instincts. And it says selfish and self-centeredness that we think is the root of our troubles. What selfish means is the tending mostly my own needs with little or no thought of others. And we want to be selfless, tending mostly to the thoughts of others with little or thought of my own needs. It's not a selfish program, by the way, that people say. But it says it's the root of our troubles. The root is a source, an origin. It's the cause of something. It's what makes something, so let's think of a tree. When you look at a tree, you see the surface of a tree and you say it's beautiful, blah, blah, blah. And you might think it's that big of a tree. What's underground tells a story. The roots of the tree go every which direction possible. Now, sometimes, they're way bigger than the tree. Now imagine if every root of the tree, hundreds of them, represented a different one of your resentments, a different one of your harms, a different one of your misdirected instincts, a different, your dishonesty. And imagine that that root is inside you, right? When we look at people, we see the surface. The alcoholic and addict, we see that. It's what's underneath that tells our story, the real story, the root of our troubles. And here's the problem. We decide to eliminate alcohol from our life. A lot of people, they just chop down the tree. They eliminate alcohol and they go to AA and they just eliminate the symptom. The root's still there. The problem's still there and they're miserable. All those things I mentioned are still there. And what happens if you pull, the weeds from your backyard or front yard? If you don't get rid of the roots, they all grow back. If you don't eliminate the root in 4 through 9, it grows back. Alcohol comes back always. Then it says, driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us soon without provocation. We invariably find at some time in the past, we've made decisions based on self, based on pride, based on self-esteem, instincts, which later place us in a position to be hurt. So I'm starting to get the drip that either these instincts could drive me, or I got to find something else that can drive me like a higher power. How many people's toes did we step on? They retaliated, and then they became our enemy. Did not we set the ball rolling? Instincts. So our troubles are basically of our own making. I was convinced it was all you guys that did it, everyone else, right? When you see it's your own troubles, guess what you get? You finally get hope. Look what it says. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic, the string case of self-will instincts run riot. Though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of selfishness. We must, or it kills us. I thought alcohol kills us. Or drugs kill us. But they're saying selfishness does. God makes that possible. It often seems we know we're entirely getting rid of is that word again, getting rid of self without his aid entirely. They're asking us to go deep on everything here, not just, pick and choose stuff. I guess without his aid. We might not be able to get rid of some, we might be able to get rid of some self, but completely get rid of self, we need God. And there's no way of completely getting rid of self without his aid. And all the joy you ever experience in life is when, all the joy you ever experience is when you're not relying on self, right? All the pain you experience in life is when you're relying on self, you're relying on instincts. If you get rid of self-will, what state we always be in? State of joy. That's what steps are all about. They're not a method to get rid of alcoholism, no. It's a method to get rid of self. So many of us have made moral self-will convictions before we cannot live up to them, even if we would like to. Now that we could reduce self-centeredness much or wishing our own power, we have to have God's help. We got to move on to the next page, page 63. These are the third step promises. They're the results if we proceed beyond step 3 and take that action. Check this out. When we sincerely, and that means honestly, self-honestly, when we sincerely took to the position, and that's God first, all sorts of remarkable things followed. We had a new employer. Being all powerful, he provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. Let's break that down a little bit. Let's break that down. There's two conditions there, two predicates to get to God. If we keep close to him and perform his work well. Let's look at those conditions. Keeping close to God. How do we do that? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And step 11. Step 4 through 9, get rid of all this stuff so I can do step 11. Keep close to God. What's God's work? Being maximum service to God and the people about us, sponsoring God's work. So what Bill's saying here, if we put God first, staying close to him, others second, doing his work, sponsoring, our needs get met. God provides for us, they're saying. Our needs get met. Look at the promises of putting God first, others second, and our needs being met. Established on such a footing, we become less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. More and more, we become interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. As we felt new power, not old power, new power flow in. As we enjoyed peace of mind. Who doesn't want peace of mind? As we discovered we could face life successfully, not failing on self-will. As we become conscious of his presence, we begin to lose the fear of today. We begin to lose the fear of tomorrow. We begin to lose the fear of hereafter, what's going to happen way off in the distance. We are reborn. Reborn into the awareness of what you are and what you've always been, God consciousness. Look at the guarantee. Reborn is not a second chance. It means a brand new beginning. It's having new life brought back, rejoining life. So another word for that is conversion. And that is the adoption of a new belief system that completely differs the old one, leading to, change of character and wholeness, personality change, sufficient recovery. We have two ways of that. Spiritual awakening, which is slowly over a period of time. Spiritual experience, boom, fast. But it's the same thing as those. Entire psychic change, as I mentioned before, all by undergoing deep spiritual change of 4 through 9. So if you think, wow, man, this guy talks a lot about God, my question is this: how successful have you been in controlling your life? Running your life, managing your life. Can you control your resentments and fear and guilt, or they control you? Can you control your pride and personal relations and self-esteem, emotions, sex, all that stuff? Or do they control you? Can you control alcohol, drugs, or whatever your thing is? Or do they control you? All these are earmarks of the unmanageable life, the insanity, a failure controlling our life. Any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. Freedom from self is the answer. The big question in step 3 is if it's just a decision, when do we turn our lives to the care of God? That was the thing I asked at the beginning. When the second the pen hits the paper in step 4. Steps 4 through 9 is the necessary action to turn our lives over to care of God. Step 10 would be to keep us there. 11 would be to celebrate and connect to it and get the directions I need. And 12 is to offer this great message to someone else. But I want to show you a third step warning, and it kind of connects to what I just said. Go to 64. And this is some deep stuff here. I point this out to everyone I can. It says, though our decision, it's right from the top, this third or fourth line down. Though our decision, step 3, was a vital and crucial step, it could have little or permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort 4, to face 5, and to rid of 6 and 7, the things in ourselves which have been blocking us from this spirit, this love within us, this directions within us, this intuition within us. That's, the third step warning. If I don't take the action it says follow at once, strenuous effort 4, to face 5, to be rid of 6 and 7. And that's going to propel me to go make amends. The God I discovered was not the God that I was told about or read about or thought existed. I don't even know what to call it sometimes. As a result of this action, I look for that, what I got from God. I look for alcohol, drugs, women, money, sex, friends. And it turned out to be the last place I'd ever look. Within myself, it's as if something, hid it from us in the last place we would look. It's not out here. And the insane mind always wants to look out here for everything. Solutions are always within. Step 3 is really where the rubber meets the road. We put our foot forward into the program recovery. We are making a decision to seek that power so we can fully experience life. Are you ready to seek? So, if you're guided into peace, so you can be guided in peace and joy. It would be insane not to make a decision. The steps are just a journey to innermost self. Only the steps can go that deep. And in those deepest dwellings of being, where we're set free. In 49, that happens. So just before I do step 3 with a sponsee, I ask some questions like, are you willing to quit playing? Are you convinced you need to quit playing God? Are you convinced any life around self-work can be a success? The ABCs ask those questions. Are you ready? Can God couldn't work if you saw it? Do you believe that? Are you ready to abandon yourself utterly to God? Are you ready to take the necessary action to turn your life over to the care of God as you understand it? And once they say that, I ask them, they can either drop their knees or they can do whatever they want, whatever they're comfortable with. And I say this with them. They say it. What we usually do is we go to this big rehab and there's like 70, 80 people there. And we get about whoever's willing to go with us, maybe 10 people. And we all do the 3rd step prayer one by one. It's really cool. So it says, God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and do with me as he wilt. Relieve me in the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties and victory over them. May bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do your will always. It says to build, and when a building gets built, and it's an old building, they put a fence around it. And then these trucks come in, and destruction has to be taken down and taken apart. So construction can happen. The trucks take all the old rubble away. And then construction rebuilds everything. And you're asking God to do that with you. And when it says, relieve me in the bondage of self, relieve me in the bondage of pride, self-esteem, all that stuff, all those instincts. I talked about entire psychic change quite a bit. And this is getting ready to wrap it up. I'm going to page 27. I'm just going to give you and the kind of the definition of what a psychic change looks like. And this spiritual awakening. It says they appear in the middle of the page. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements. That means rid of, rearrangements, redo, or redone. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes which were once the guiding force of the lives of these men are suddenly cast to one side. It happens in 5, 6, and 7. And completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate us. When we move everything out of the way, what's been in our heart all along, these deep conceptions and motives, like when you're doing something wrong, you knew you were doing something wrong, something told you, your intuition, that becomes to dominate you. This is telling me the stuffs are not about gaining anything, they're about losing something, so I can become closer to the consciousness within myself. Complete psychic change sufficient to bring about recovery. 4 through 9, 10, 11, 12, continuous nurturing of that psychic change. I teach the big book today because I hope it matters for somebody. I know the difference it can make. And I began this journey 21 years ago. I had no idea I would make it. I had no idea I could make a life difference of another. And these steps changed my life forever. It was an honor to do this today. I want to close with a short story. And this sums up the way I look at life today. And you probably heard the story before. There's a little boy walking down the beach. And he comes across the beach and there's hundreds of starfish washed up on the beach, hundreds of them. When they keep the beach, they dry out. So the little boy sees them and he starts throwing them one by one into the water. And off in the distance, there's an old man watching him do so. And after he sees the boy throw, over 100 of these starfish back in there, and he still got his work ahead of him. The old man walks up to the little boy and he says, "You really think you can save all these starfish?" And he looks at the old man and he holds the starfish in his face and he says, "To this very starfish, it makes all the difference in the world." And he throws it in the water. And that's why I do what I do. to hope to make a difference in life of another. Thank you for letting me come on here today. I really enjoyed it. Hope I didn't go too long.
Thank you, Steve.